Federal Election Commission records are showing former President Trump with more money in his war chest than both the DNC and RNC combined. Trump's cash on hand at the end of February was a whopping $110.4 million. The DNC showed $52.9 million, while the RNC showed just $45.5 million.
Joining us now to weigh in is Policy Director at the Conservative Partnership Institute, Rachel Bovard. Rachel, welcome.
Good morning.
So what should we make of this? We'll certainly be stuck with Trump regardless of what we want because he's just the best financed player in the race.
So I don't actually even think he is the best financed player in the race. I think he has a lot of money. But if you look at sort of the unintended consequences of Citizens United, it was this. It made the party committees completely irrelevant and, bumped up the super PACs of major politicians. So yes, you have Trump with 110 million. I would point you back to the 2020 cycle where Mitch McConnell's leadership PAC, I think, had something like $500 million in it. Just at the end of 2021, they had $90 million in it. So they may rival or exceed what Trump has in his pocket. And again, this just goes back to how our money power dynamics work in politics now. It's not about the party committees. It's about who's donating to your race and then what you owe them for that. If you want to ask, why Mitch McConnell's remained leader for so long among Senate Republicans, the Senate leadership PAC has a lot to do with it.
And do we have to start factoring this into the question of whether or not Trump is going to pull the trigger and actually run? Because if he doesn't run, then he has to just either sit on this money or share it with other people. And those are two things that Trump absolutely would not want to do. The only way to spend the money at Trump Tower, at Mar-a-Lago, on a nice plane to fly around the country would be to run. And so
right.
do you think he has so much money now that access to that money becomes a factor in his calculus?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a leading indicator of some kind of decision. Whether or not it's been made, I don't know. But Trump likes to sort of, in addition to considering running himself, he likes to at least try to play this role of kingmaker. Although I think where normal candidates would use money to sort of make that dispensation, I think Trump's ego is very important here, and he likes, to choose his favorite candidates, I think sometimes based on other criteria. But I think you're right. This is an indication that I think he may be preparing to launch a bid or at least line up allies around him. And, unfortunately, in the state of money politics, money talks. And that is exactly what these PACs are being used for in certain scenarios. But I also think it goes back to kind of what Robbie was saying in the beginning, which is, the fact that Trump is able to sweep up all these donations speaks, as I've said many times before, that Trump is still one of the most popular, if not the most popular Republican in the party. And there's a lot of people that hate that. There's a lot of people that don't like that. But that is the reality. And I think as a party, we have to either, sort of figure out how we're going to deal with it or move on from it. And I think it's the latter right now.
Yeah, it seems to me there's only two factions in the Republican Party that really matter. The pro-Trump and want Trump, more Trump and Trump forever faction, and the faction that also likes Trump quite a bit but doesn't need him to be the nominee and would like to see someone else, but they're not anti-Trump by any stretch of the imagination. And, so these are not two factions that necessarily don't get along, but they're going to have to, they're going to shape who's going to be the nominee. How do you see that playing out?
It's interesting, even from a candidacy perspective, you have a lot of potential candidates that I think would be running in 2024, but will not put their toe in the water if there's even an open question that Trump may run because he is that powerful right now. And I'm not even talking about the money. It's just that, his base of support is so wide in the party that he can sort of turn that against people. And nobody really wants to take him on in that regard. So I almost think that this issue resolves itself by whatever Trump decides. I don't think if Trump gets in the race, there's a lot of room for debate over someone running against him, within the party. Do I think people will try? Potentially. I think you'll see, it's an open question what Mike Pence would do in that situation. But I think some people have taken themselves off the table, potential candidates. I think Nikki Haley has said she won't run in 2024. I don't know if Ron DeSantis has said he will or won't, but I think he's hedging to not, in that direction if Trump runs. So Trump will make this decision for the party, I think is where we stand right now.
And Trump may also be seeing his pockets get even bigger as porn star Stormy Daniels was court-ordered to pay Trump nearly $300,000 in attorney's fees after her failed defamation lawsuit. The amount It's the same amount Daniels was conned out of by her former lawyer and resistance hero, Michael Avenatti. What did you make of that ruling?
I mean, there are so many sideshows that have gone on in the last 4 years. It's like I can't keep track of them. But this is kind of like there were parts of the mainstream press that lionized Michael Avenatti and Stormy Daniels. I think they made the talk show circuit. So this is a little embarrassing for them. Now there's a little bit of egg on their face. But you know what? I wish her well. I don't know what else to say to it.
And he did use what? He had Michael Cohen use what? Was it Trump Organization cash or was it campaign cash to pay her off?
Oh, right. Yeah.
Which you can't do.
Yeah, that's a no-no.
Apparently, well, maybe you can do it if you're Trump.
It's hard to know.
No.
But I mean, this shows that part of the reason why I'm not massively in favor of like campaign finance reform type stuff, and I'm curious for your take on this, Rachel. There's a lot of shuffling money from one group of people to another. You make the rules a little harsher, but the process kind of works it out, and maybe even the more entrenched political insiders figure out how to better manipulate it. It's not like you actually ever succeed at getting money out of politics or whatever the kind of reformers aspire to.
Yeah, I think overall that's true. People are always going to find a way to benefit the entrenched sort of incumbents in the money race. But I do think that there has been some downstream effects of Citizens United that we just haven't, no one's looked at the landscape and really assessed how it's changed. I mean, some people have. But, I think what we're seeing now is it's created these little fiefdoms, these empires within empires, where single politicians can become so powerful just from a financial standpoint that you can't ever resist them in any possible way. And I do think it's worth examining, whether or not that should be changed. And I'm speaking specifically, I can't really speak to how Democrats, would view this on their own turf. But from where I sit, I don't love the fact that we have now entrenched establishment Republicans to the extent that, their tentacles are everywhere. There's a lot of, I would love to see actually robust competition to Mitch McConnell in a Republican leader race. You will never see that because he ceded so much cash to the incoming senators that they feel beholden to him. And just from a purely representative government standpoint, I have a lot of problems with that. Do I think money will ever leave politics? No, I don't. But, I do wonder if there's a discussion to be had about pushing a few more parameters in place where none exist now.
It's a huge problem on the Democratic side, but the ability of people like Bernie Sanders, Ocasio-Cortez, even Elizabeth Warren in 2012 raised a ton of small dollars. Like that access to kind of activist cash, small dollars, it creates a balancing with the big money center, and it has shifted the dynamics a little bit. On the Republican side, there's a ton of small dollar money. A lot of it's going to Trump. Are people like Are other senators and House members just not able to tap into it in the same way that they are on the Democratic side? Although obviously I'm sure Marjorie Taylor Greene is, her campaign coffers are just stocked with, $5 contributions every time she goes out and owns Ilhan Ilmar or whatever.
Yeah, that's a great point about activist money. And I do think actually Marjorie Taylor Greene was one of the top raising Republicans in the last cycle. So I think, that's a point well taken. I think it's on the right, there's been a little bit of resistance to building the infrastructure necessary, I think, to take on some of the bigger players, than maybe the left has shown. Although, my current boss, Senator Jim DeMint, founded Senate Conservatives Fund as an alternative to the McConnell PAC and took so much heat for doing it. So, when you do go out and try to fund the alternatives, you can do it. And I think that's a point well taken. But you're battling against the establishment forces, not just in Washington, but, sort of you're trying to also do business in a city where these people control not just the coffers, but, the media spin and every position of power as well. So it's an uphill battle, but hopefully it can be done.
Well, thank you, Rachel.
Thanks, guys.
More Rising right after this.